So I've just recently made a two-part video on my healing process as a fearful avoidant, and today is more of a Q&A edition. So I did receive some questions on Reddit and just a few on YouTube, so I want to take time today to answer these questions. So let's start with the Reddit questions. I had already filmed that part, so here we go. So this one, on the path of becoming more secure and meeting new connections, would you say if you feel no attraction in the beginning, is it reasonable to conclude it is not a fit after 1 or 2 dates? Do you think avoidants on the path to secure should consider overcorrecting and giving things more time to play out before deciding non-fit? Absolutely. If you have done self-discovery and you know what you want in a partnership, you're gonna know if it's an absolute non-fit. And if you're not sure, and if there's stuff that you're like, oh, this person is bringing something that I do want in a relationship, continue. Like attraction, chemistry can be built, okay? Like when you build a bond. The most important part is, first of all, seeing if we are compatible, because you can have chemistry and there's no compatibility and it's gonna hurt you down the line. You can't build a sustainable relationship only off chemistry, and as fearful avoidants we tend to focus more on that, like, oh, is there chemistry? If there's not, it's not a match. But it's not only that, like, it's mostly compatibility, and there needs to be chemistry, but that can happen after a few dates. I would definitely suggest to go through it and see for yourself and not jump to the conclusion that it's not a fit. And the worst case is that it doesn't work, but you discovered yourself more through this process. So just give yourself a chance. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Just try, be vulnerable, be authentic, ask the right questions, try to see if there's something more to this person and this connection. And if after all this, after trying and asking questions and really you sharing your truth and going deeper with this person, and you see that, oh, it's not leading anywhere, it's okay, just end it and that's it. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Sometimes we make this so complicated. Like, it's crazy. Oh my god, humans. So as an FA in the process of healing, I think it would be helpful to have tips on how to deal with the guilt that comes up from how I treated past partners because of my trauma. So I did address this a bit in the first when I was talking about forgiveness. I didn't address this specifically about how we would have treated people in the past, but it all comes back to forgiveness that we have to give to ourselves for acknowledging the struggle that we have been going through, and knowing that however we have acted, however like the patterns have come up, doesn't say anything about who we are as a person, like our value and our worth, okay? This is just a representation of the wounds that are inside, and that is not your fault. Whatever you are carrying inside is a burden for you, okay? And you didn't choose to have these wounds. You didn't choose to have these fears. And if you're an FA that is on its healing process, like, you are doing your best. You are taking responsibility for these wounds that are not your fault. There's so much honor in that. There's so much courage in that. So my invitation or my tip is to look at the strength that you are having into facing these things that are very scared, that a lot of the people won't even dare to go there. And I know, like, hurt people will hurt people. And it's a sad condition that we have as humans, that when we're in our unconscious pain, we will sadly bleed on other people. But that's just humanity, you know? That's just the concept of being human. Like, give yourself the grace to be human and to be imperfect. And that mantra that I talked about, like, of Ho'oponopono, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. This is something you can say to these past partners, like, while you're meditating. There's some YouTube videos, you can write that in the caption and find a meditation of Ho'oponopono, and you can imagine the person you hurt, you've bled on, and say these things like, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you and thank you. And you could add stuff like, I'm sorry for hurting you while I was hurt. Please forgive me, and etc. You know, and that could be a tool that could help. You can also, someone wrote in the thread that like actually contacted people after their healing journey and said, like, even if it was like 20 years ago, like, hey, I'm sorry for what I did in the past, and it was really well received. That's something you could do. But you could also write letters that you're not going to specifically send to these people and share how, like, you're sorry about how things unfolded, and really like cut this cord of shame and know that you are doing your best and you have always done your best. You are taking radical responsibility, and that's all that matters, you know, and build that self-love inside. Okay, this question is good. I did answer a lot of it already, but there's other things that I want to address. So this person is saying that they are an FA and they know that they can be in a secure relationship at some point, but their issue is that I can't get into one in the first place. I can't tell if I'm being too picky because I raised my standards after the last toxic relationship I had, or that I'm being my old avoidant self where I'd find the smallest flaw and bail after the first date. Probably both. So before getting into the other part, is it because your standards are higher, or is it because you're being too picky? And I believe there's a fine line between both of them. Just as it's okay to have higher standards, because now that you went through hell in a previous relationship, you know what you don't want, you know what your value is, you know what you are aiming for, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with putting the bar high. But now look at what you are being picky about. Are you being picky about stuff like, he's not tall enough, I'm not sure about this, and about stuff that are like not as relevant to like something deeper you want in a relationship? So if it's about like, oh, I don't like he doesn't want kids and I want, that's value, like, you know that you want some, so that's a non-negotiable. So beforehand, if you haven't done this already, like, do discover yourself on what is important for me in a relationship, what are my non-negotiables, what are my values, and all these things, so that when you do meet someone, you can be like, does this match this? You know, and somewhere there's compromise, okay? We can't jump to conclusions, because sometimes we have this whole list, and relationships are not about like this person being the perfect person, but the core elements of like how I want to be treated, about the values this person have, does this match? If it does match and you're being picky about other stupid stuff, look deeper. Look deeper where your resistance is, and if there's chemistry and you see there's compatibility, continue exploring this until you have more answers. So let's continue on this one. Also, my biggest fear is that I will never be able to get rid of my programming where I instinctively go towards damaged people, either too cold or unavailable, or too needy and pathetic. I'm bracketing still, going in neither extreme, but never finding that middle ground of normal guys. How do you get attracted to a secure, kind, available person? I feel like this is like the sum up of my whole 2 videos. Look for evidence that it's possible for you. Don't feed on the idea that I will never be able to get rid of this programming. Feed on the idea that I am currently healing and learning how to get rid of this programming. Focus on what you want to see grow and not on what you don't want to see grow. And know that if it's possible for me, if it's possible for tons of people who've healed, it's possible for you too. Continue on feeding your reason why this is important. So if you continue to go in your pattern of you're always going towards dismissive people who's going to reject you, or you're always going towards like whatever the pattern is, continue on feeding why this is not what you want, and why you will honor yourself to go towards what you want. So for me, like, yes, I always had an attraction for people who rejected me, but after that relationship, I was like, I don't want that, because I lost myself so much. There's nothing worth losing myself like that again. So every time I would be in a relationship like that, I would remind myself that it's not worth it. You have to trust that the work is working, that the healing work you're doing is working, and you will see it when you get on the other side of it. Oftentimes it's just like when we look back that we see the difference, and not when we're in the midst of it. How did you learn to stop swinging back and forth between anxious and avoidant? You know, as I explained, I still experience that to that day, but instead of being in these extremes, I'm here. It's more stable because I've created safety from within, and every time I do get into those extremes, I sit with it. So the fact that I've been meeting it, first of all, it helped me gain a lot of self-awareness on where it's coming from, like what fears it's coming from. And since I released a lot of these fears and addressed them, like the gap between this pattern that is only there to protect me, that is an automatic response, I've been like rewiring it, and now it doesn't need to be as extreme. And I also don't let it accumulate as much, because the extreme of push and pull is very unconscious. It happens at an unconscious level, and it's because something accumulated that you didn't gain awareness about, and you let it build up, and then you're in this extreme. Then it feels like it's sudden, but it's been building up and you were not aware of it. So the more you gain self-awareness, the more you allow yourself to like feel how you're feeling, the more the cues are going to come earlier. And instead of building up, you're going to be like, oh, I notice a bit of avoidance right now, let me see what it is. And it won't go in that extreme, it won't accumulate, and you will free yourself from it. So that's the whole process of healing as a fearful avoidant. Have you felt the need to steer away from relationships with insecurely attached partners entirely? I would say yes. If someone is insecure, I'm gonna notice it right away. If they're at the beginning of their healing journey or unconscious about it, I'm gonna be pretty turned off, because it's just not a frequency match to where I am. It's not in resonance, so I don't think that this is the person for me. If they're like further along their healing journey and there's still some remainings, like that's not what's gonna stop me. I understand the process and we can help each other out, you know? How do you see insecure attached people nowadays? Do they repel you or put you off in some way? Definitely repel me on a romantic side. Like I'm still gonna have compassion and love and care for them, but I won't want to like date them. Has your internal radar shifted, or do you need to make conscious decisions not to go for people you find attractive despite them being insecure? So for me, the anxious side, I always was repelled by that. I did, like at the beginning of like September, October, did meet someone that was more dismissive, and there was a part of me that was attracted towards that, but I've gained so much consciousness around this matter that I noticed that was that pattern. My radar did shift, and since I know it was that, there was a part of me that was repelled from it, and I just know that with all the internal work I did, I would be unable to be with someone like that at this point. Okay, this one is good, and I haven't talked about it. So it's how to navigate relationships, friends, family, and partner while on the healing journey. And specifically, what to communicate about what I am experiencing. So it's basically about how to communicate while I'm in the midst of my healing journey and I'm still doing mistakes, I'm still being activated or deactivated. And I feel like it's going to be different if you're talking to a family member, a friend, or a partner, and it depends on your relationship with everyone, okay? So like a family member, you could be close emotionally to this person, you can not be close, you can be living with them, you can not be living with them, so it's really going to be like a case by case. But overall, I feel like as a fearful avoidant, sometimes we over-explain or shut down completely, but sometimes we just overshare like everything and try to explain everything, and we think we're being honest, but we're just like laying everything out, and it's not coming from a place of being gathered and having held space for yourself. So the point that I said to hold space for yourself applies here too, that if you want to communicate something to someone, instead of saying it in the spur of the moment, step back, sit with how you're feeling, journal about it, and then come back and share more of a gathered way about what you're going through, and talk about like, hey, I deactivated here because this fear came out, and I'm sorry about that. I'm still working on this. But my advice before this is that if there's people around you that you're close to, you can't talk about where you're at in your healing journey without something having to have happened. So your partner, let's say, you can't say like, hey, talk about the attachment style, say I noticed that I'm fearful avoidant and I'm working through my healing process, so there's moments maybe I'm going to deactivate if I feel overwhelmed, or those moments where my anxious side comes out when I notice things that are not congruent. And so you're kind of a bit explaining your pattern and being like, I'm aware of this and I'm working on it. And you can open the conversation to them that like, if there's something you are noticing that is hurting you in the process, like I'm open to talk about it. Maybe the best way to talk about it would be to first find a moment that we are both receptive and blah blah. So you're like laying the cards. It won't come out of the blue that, oh, you're suddenly pushing this person away. And if you need space, you won't need to over explain it. You'll be like, hey, I'm deactivating right now, I'll just need a day for myself, or something like that. And the person is going to know where you're coming from. So the people that are closest to you can definitely sit down and talk about this, and just like share your truth. And you don't need to go into details of every little thing you're going through. Just like explain the big lines. Yeah, that would be my advice. How do you start to heal? I've been in therapy for ages and I feel like I've not progressed with this issue. So, okay, I definitely talked about healing in the all 2 videos. I'm not going to repeat what I said. I just want to say one thing about this. Self-awareness doesn't make you heal. Talk therapy is focused on gaining self-awareness and coping tools, and can be very useful at some point in your healing journey. It can be complementary, okay? It can be useful in so many ways, but it's not the only way. And if you only do that, there's missing a huge part of the puzzle, which is to release, which is to feel your emotions, which is to hold that kind of space and really like rewire the whole thing. So that is why like just talking about it, oftentimes it can also re-traumatize you, because you're just repeating the same stories of I'm like this because of that, I'm feeling this emotion, I have this pattern, and you're just creating an identity over your patterns, over your trauma, and you're just keeping it in place. You're not truly releasing it. You're just repeating the same story. Now that the Reddit questions are done, let's look at the questions I've got from YouTube. It's all the same person, but she asked 3 questions, so I'll take the time to answer all 3. The first question is, what strategies do you use to self-regulate when you are triggered? For me, it's journaling. While it helps, it doesn't magically make me feel a lot better that very instant. So the strategies I use are very intuitive at this point, but it all comes back to the same concept of retrieving and pausing and spending time alone with what I'm feeling. Instead of reacting, I'm spending time with myself so I can respond to the trigger and address the trigger. So whatever allows me to quiet down. So it could be taking a walk outside, taking a bath, journaling too, stuff like that. But I just want to challenge this like next part of the question where it doesn't magically make me feel a lot better that very instant. There's no quick fix. The goal is not to magically feel better and to do one thing and then you don't feel triggered anymore and then you feel good again and then you're regulated again. The point is to learn from those triggers, to learn from what has awakened inside. So journaling is a great tool because it really helps to put everything, all the mashup of stuff happening inside in words. It helps to realign your thoughts and bring more inner clarity. But the goal here is not to make those triggers disappear. It's not to instantly regulate yourself. The goal is to build something that's sustainable, tools that will help you on the long run and to address what has awakened inside. So I would say if you're looking for some self-regulation tools, explore what works for you outside of just journaling. Like, do things that are calming, do things that allow you to settle down. It could be like, for some people, it could be dancing, it could be cooking, it could be to just like do something that brings joy to you. And every time it can be something different. Like, I don't have one thing that I always do. Sometimes I journal, but sometimes there's something else that's being called for me to do. So it's really powerful to learn to step back and really ask yourself, what do I need right now? What is my highest right now? What will feel the most liberating for me at this moment? For me, the answer is always different, but it always boils down to taking some time off and doing something that recenters me, like quieting the outside noise and listening to what's inside. And it depends on the level of the trigger too. So the next question is, do you feel like love languages are connected to your attachment style? Personally, words don't mean much to me, but I show my affection through gifts and acts of service. I can't fully speak on this because I don't have the answer. I do feel to some level our love language is attached to our experiences that we had when we were young, and mostly to the wounds and the traumas, and our love language is coping with what we didn't receive or what we were lacking. But I can't speak fully on this. I don't feel like every fearful avoidant is gonna fit into a category of the love language. For me, it's quality time and physical touch. And if I look at the father figure I had in my life, I didn't have deep quality time. Like he was physically present, but there was emotional unavailability. So I didn't really connect with him and I didn't feel seen, you know? So that's very important that's a love language that's important for me. And physical touch, in a way, like when I was a baby, he didn't change our diapers and stuff. So maybe it could come from that. But I also didn't really get words of affirmation from him, and that's not something that is so important to me. So it's give and take. I can't fully speak on this, to be honest. And the last question is, do you have any tips on the matter of what type of meditation to choose and how to actually do it? I want to get into that since I already practice affirmations and gratitude. So to my perspective, the most powerful meditation that we can do is the most simplest one. It's not a guided meditation. It's simply meditating, lying down, maybe putting a little background music with no lyrics, and just putting an alarm and just spending that time with yourself. Just listening to the thoughts, listening to what surfaces, and just allowing what wants to be seen. I often get stuff that arises in those moments, or not, but it really brings a calming effect. And I find that's the most powerful meditation, because when we do a guided meditation, there's always an external output, which doesn't allow us to fully hear what's going inside. So in a way, it's distracting ourselves, and it's not truly the purpose of meditation of witnessing what's going inside. But there's definitely, like with YouTube, you have access to so much meditation. So I would say just like explore. There's inner child healing meditations that could be very powerful for healing our wounds, for holding space for the fears inside and the stories inside, and that inner child that didn't have that space held for itself. So inner child healing. I don't do guided meditations, like I don't personally do them, so I can't tell you one in particular, but if you do a research, that can be one that could be powerful. And you can even you yourself, I do this inner child healing meditation with myself at times. It's more like a visualization where when I'm going through something, I'm gonna imagine the version of me that went through that. So it could be the version of me when I was 15 or when I was 5 or when I was 10, and I'm gonna speak with this inner child. I'm gonna speak with this version of myself as if I was the parent, as if I was the third party and not the person experimenting it. And I would tell them like, hey, I know it's been hard, and I would put myself in their feelings and really speak to them in a loving, compassionate way. And oftentimes what happens is like that version of me that's still living inside of me feels finally safe to express itself, and then I start crying, and then I experience a huge release. So if you want to focus more on like healing a wound, that could be something that you do, but really just meditating with yourself is powerful in itself, and it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And what the challenge you can do is to start, let's say 10 or 20 minutes, and then go up. Because there's a point where there's a resistance inside, and there's a part of you, if something wants to come up, there might be a part of you that's like, take your phone, how long it's been. And there's a part resisting wanting to come out of the meditation because it's scared of what's coming up. And that's where the true golden nugget is. I aim to just always show up in the most authentic, vulnerable, and transparent way possible, and offering as much as I can. Like I wanted this channel to be a safe space for all of us to feel seen and express ourselves. So if that calls to you, you can follow, and I'm sending you so much love.